You're welcome back. Now, just this morning, news came in that a group of senior Gabonese military officers have announced today that they have seized power shortly after the state election body declared President Ali Bongo the winner of Saturday's general elections. Now, Gabon's President Ali Bongo has held power for 14 years after taking over from his father, Omar Bongo. This happened in 2019. Now, appearing on state-run television, the military officers declared the nullification of Saturday's election results and the dissolution of state institutions, as well as the closure of all borders until further notice. Gabon becomes the second African country to experience a coup just this year, following Niger. Now, as these things unfold around us, Niger and Gabon being the latest countries in Africa to go by way of coup, following Mali and Burkina Faso, it starts to become apparent that the unrest across this country could become contagious. So, as a nation that has prided itself in its peace and stability, what are the concerns that Ghana ought to be addressing to ensure we don't go the same way? Well, thankfully, we have an institution that concerns itself with nothing but peace. It's the Peace Council, and its chair joins us this afternoon. We're very honored to have you with us, sir. What a pleasure.
For having us.
Now, the Peace Council needs no introduction. You've been doing your work for a very long time. But for those who might have been living under a rock, maybe you can ease us into it by explaining exactly what the mandate is of the Council.
The Act that established the Peace Council, Act 818, the Act simply says that the mandate of the Council is to facilitate and develop mechanisms for conflict prevention, conflict management, and conflict resolution, and to build sustainable peace in the country. So basically, our mandate is to develop and facilitate mechanisms for peace in this country.
Now, Reverend Dr. Edu Gyamfi, peace is something that Ghana has taken for granted. Yes, we have pockets of violence in some parts of our country. We've had historical recurring violence in other parts as well. But generally, Ghana has credentials as a peaceful country. Does that sometimes make you and your colleagues feel a little bit redundant?
No, I think we are concerned about the peace of this country, and especially looking at what's happening within the sub-region. It's a matter of concern to us to continue to maintain the peace that we enjoy in this country. Sometimes when one travels out of the country, you come back, you begin to realize that Ghana has something that is quite unique. There's a need for all of us to do the best we can to protect the peace that we have in this country. So the Peace Council is really conscious of what's happening in our sub-region, and we're doing the best we can to maintain the peace that we have in this country.
So, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, now Gabon. In fact, before all of this business, we also had unrest, if not coup d'etats, in places like Sudan. We've had to deal with all this. Libya. How concerned should Ghana be about this sort of thing making its way into our borders?
I think there's something happening around our sub-region that all of us ought to be concerned about. And we have been talking about these things to those in authority to critically look at them. And it's got to do with youth unemployment. It's a major issue within the sub-region. I think that we have to do everything, not only for government, but for the opposition, for businesses, to look at what can we do as a country to deal with this issue. Because if we don't tackle it, we are likely to have major problems on our hands going forward.
Are they listening to you?
Well, I think they are. We've had several meetings and we've pointed out these things, that these are concerns that we see. We think that is a major issue that must be tackled.
What exactly has been your advice? What specific things have you been advising government, opposition, stakeholders to do to prevent such outcomes?
Well, the first thing is that there ought to be employment avenues. And we see now that we have free SHS, we're turning out a lot of students coming out. We have to find the avenue to engage all of them, and also to provide resource to ensure that once they get out of school, they will find something to do. And this is not only the concern of government. I believe that there's a need for some form of a national dialogue to discuss this issue. Because one government will go, another government will come. And if we don't deal with it, everybody will inherit the problem. And there's a need for some form of consensus for us to discuss this issue. What do we do? How do we engage businesses, entrepreneurs to look at the options that are available and find some solution to this problem?
Now, earlier I mentioned recurring pockets of violence, which we had to live with in some parts of our country for a very, very long time. Spilled over into violent attacks and so forth. They still happen. What would the Peace Council say has been your achievement in this area? Do you feel that your presence has in some way helped this situation?
I think we've done the best that we can. But it's important to put on record that currently the Peace Council has about 292 chieftaincy conflicts in this country. And on my way to the studio, I had a call from another location where something is coming up. And I asked them to file a complaint with our complaints department to see what we can do. Now, this has a reason, partly because in the past, nobody looked at land as it's being looked at now. For those of us in Accra, when I came to Accra initially around the mid-80s, anybody who lived around Ofankor in those areas considered out of Accra. Yeah. Damfa area, nobody looked at those places. But right now, people are living way out of Accra and coming back into the city. So the need for land has become an issue. Now, chiefs who didn't seem to have given serious attention to their land boundaries in the past are now critically looking at them. Some are trying to also encroach on others. So that has raised a lot of concern for us. And we're doing the best we can to tackle a lot of these things. But the Peace Council cannot do it alone. We need the Minister of Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs to be involved in this matter. And also, the judiciary should also come to our aid in resolving this. So we need a collective effort to deal with this matter, because if we leave it only in the hands of the Peace Council, we will go in to mediate. But at the end of the day, the laws must be established, boundaries must be set, people must be made to understand that you can't go beyond these things. Those are the concerns and the challenges we are dealing with.
Are these institutions responding to your calls? chieftaincy, the judiciary and so forth, are they engaging?
Yes, we're engaging all of them. We've had meetings with them, and we're hoping that we'll still engage them further to ensure that we deal with some of these issues.
Is it expensive to run the Peace Council?
It's quite expensive, but we don't have all that it takes. Currently, we're being supported from the Consolidated Fund, but like any other governmental institution, we know the challenges that we have. The Act establishes that we should have a peace fund. So 2 years ago, we launched the peace fund. Unfortunately, we didn't get the support that we actually needed. Most of our running expenses in terms of salaries of our staff, capital expenses, and goods and services are provided by the government. Right. In terms of operational, most of our funding have come from external sources, especially from the UNDP, DANIDA, and the Canadian Embassy, USAID, and all of those. These are all the institutions that are supporting us to do a lot of the work that we do. But we think that if we were able to get the Peace Fund to function the way it ought to function, because our work is so fluid. You sit up today and somebody shoots somebody somewhere. Immediately, everybody is screaming, where is the Peace Council? And people don't realize that the members of the council are not full-time staff. All of them are scattered across the country. Everybody's doing something else. And there's an emergency, you have to call everybody back to Accra. You have to pay for transport. You have to get their hotels and all of those things. So the council needs money readily on hand to do a lot of things that we ought to do. So when something happens and people start screaming, where's the Peace Council, where's the Peace Council, they are not thinking about the fact that all the individuals are doing there. Even the chairman is not a full-time staff. So we have the executive secretary and some other staff who are working with us. But in all, we have about 67 members on staff across the country in all the 16 regions. That makes it not enough. So we need a lot of resource to get our work done. And we appeal to the public, to the business community. If there's any challenge, businesses will have to shut down. And I think that the business community must come to the aid of the Peace Council and ensure that we have resources to do that.
Do you have any sort of sustainable plan to propose in terms of how the Peace Council is funded, besides relying on the kindness of strangers, so to speak? Is there some business model or some means by which the Peace Council considers that you could be funded on a more reliable and consistent basis?
For now, what the Act gives us the mandate to do is to establish the fund. So that's what we're looking at. But we do write a lot of proposals. That's why we're able to get funding from some of these agencies, these partners, But sometimes we get worried about that because when you have external partners supporting you, they will demand reports. So after the whole program is run, you have to write a report to them. So invariably, you are sharing your national information with other people elsewhere. That is one of the things that makes it important for us as a nation to do the best we can to fund the Peace Council to the full, to ensure that we have resources to do all the things that ought to be done.
I suspect if you were to list your challenges, funding would be right up there, probably in the top three. What would the other two be?
Well, not related to funding. Fortunately, there is a proposal now. When the Wesley Girls issue came up, we went to Parliament, we met with the leadership of Parliament. That was when they began to look at the concerns of the council, because everybody had assumed all along that the Peace Council was established, they were well off and all of that, until we got there. And that day, they started with all kinds of accusations, and we drew the attention to the fact that all council members who came, they were driving our own cars, we fueled it ourselves and running affairs. They were shocked. So they took up the issue to Parliament and asked that the Peace Council be put under the Common Fund. Right. But Common Fund has not also been able to support as we had expected. So we have all these challenges. But we're hoping that going forward, probably as things ease up, these resources will come in to help us. But with that intervention, there's now the proposal to build a new facility for us. Because where we are squatting now, we have been even injected. We have not made noise because it will be too embarrassing for the country to hear that Peace Council is being ejected from where they are. So we need facilities to accommodate our staff. We need vehicles to run around and get our work done, in addition to the need for funding.
Now, nobody can miss the heavy representation of religious bodies on the Peace. Try to have representation of all the major religious groupings. But there's a saying that you can't solve a problem with the same sort of mindset that caused it. And it is generally believed that most of the worst conflicts in the world formed along religious lines. So is that something that you are conscious of, that even the constitution of your body is a potential source of conflict?
Well, I think the framers of the Act did very well in putting that group together. We think that that is our advantage instead of a disadvantage. It's been a major advantage. And we've had 13 African countries who've been here to study the work of the Peace Council. And all of them are surprised that we can put Muslims and Christians together in one room. And if you come to our board meetings, we sit there like brothers and sisters. It's beautiful to see that relationship. That within the act, the composition of the act, we can bring Christians, Muslims, traditional religious practices, chiefs, queen mothers, CSOs, and all of these things together. I think it's been very helpful. And we've had a lot of instances where certain cases have arisen, where in the course of our meeting, for instance, there's something happening somewhere involving an Islamic group. We tell our members, they put in one phone call, and the next minute it stopped. You know, we had one case in Congo like that, you know, and those things have been very helpful. So I think that, and people respect the council also because of its composition. We have these high religious leaders who are chiefs and others who are there. And that gives us a certain image, you know. So I think that the framers did well in putting that together, which is quite unique. Because in other countries, they've tried setting up peace councils, but most of the appointees are from the government. And once you do that, people don't trust the system, you know. So in our situation, it's that the government has no control over who goes to the peace council because the religious institutions nominate their own people. They are vetted, and once the vetting goes through, they are there. And the government has only 2 appointees who come in. And the choice of who leads the council is done by the members themselves, supervised the electoral commission. So we choose our own chair, and then we present to the president that this is the chair. You can't do anything about it. We hope that it works out very well.
Let me ask you this, Reverend Dr. Edudjemfi. You, as a council, you concern yourselves with various types of conflict. We saw you intervening when Archbishop Janasari ran into some sort of confrontation with the people of Nogopo. So what are the upper and lower limits of the types of conflicts you will get involved in? I mean, if somebody and his wives are having a conflict in their home, can we expect the Peace Council to want a role in that? I mean, yeah, what are the upper and lower limits of the types of conflicts you would want to be involved in resolving?
Thank you for that question. At the moment, the Act does not place an upper and lower limit. But we are working on the possibility of having an ally to back the Act that will, as it were, explain what we can do. Currently, we are being called to do a lot of things that we know is not within our mandate. And sometimes the public does not seem to understand that this is happening. We are calling the Peace Council. They are not there. Why are they not responding? Why are they not speaking to this issue? But there are areas where we recognize our boundaries, and we don't want to move into that space to create a problem. Right now, people are legally exposed in this country. And if you don't take care, you could draw yourself into a problem. And so the council is cautious about that. And so we want to stay away from those areas where we don't have a mandate to operate. But we think that with the establishment of the LI, it will be helpful to, as it were, probably broaden some of the expectations, because the public expects so much from us. Things that are not even within, like you said, somebody in the Wi-Fi fighting, somebody who wears the Peace Council. I recall when the current Parliament began and we had all those confrontations, somebody called me at 4 a.m. and asked, Chairman, where are you? I said, I'm sleeping. And I said, why are you sleeping? You should have been in Parliament right now. I said, what's happening? I turned on my television and saw what was going on. I said, what locus do I have? These are parliamentarians. They have their own enclave. I can't go in there. But that is the kind of expectation that the public has. So it's a major challenge for us. But we do the best we can within that scope.
Now I can't shake the mental image of you tackling Carlos Ahincry and asking him to give peace a chance. Dr. Edudjemfi, Reverend Dr. Edudjemfi, the public have high expectations of the Peace Council, but I have no doubt that leaders like yourself also have high expectations of your own organization. So what's the dream? What's the vision? What's that thing that you're hoping the Peace Council can achieve, 10 years from now?
Well, our hope is that we will sustain the peace of this country. if you look at what's going on around our sub-region, especially our close neighbors, and the fact that we can stay in this country and live peacefully, this is something that we believe we should be able to sustain. So we're doing all the things that we can to do this. There are some issues that we have tackled that sometimes we don't even bring to the public domain. For instance, last year, we did very extensive work in the Volta region. When we heard the concerns of the people in the Volta region, the fact that they feel marginalized, and all kinds of things. So we went to 16 communities, stayed there with them, engaged the people from chiefs to the lowest person, to talk to them, to hear from them. We compiled all the report, we brought it back, and then we shared it with the Minister of National Security. We went back to the Volta region for them to validate what we've done. And I think that some of these things help to mitigate some of the concerns that people have. We've done work with Queen Mothers, helping them to understand the role they ought to play in terms of the peace of this country. This year we have training for GPRTU, helping them to be mindful of these extreme threats that are likely to happen. They move people around, how they ought to be mindful of who is boarding a vehicle and all of that. We've had training for fishermen and fisherwomen, one in Adan, one in Elmina, to help them to understand, much as we are all concerned about the northern part of our borders, nobody is thinking seriously about the southern part, and especially the sea. Yeah. So we had to share some thoughts with them to be mindful of what they see on the high seas and the need to report and all of those things. Because currently, I think the last 1 year, we've had some form of calmness in the country in terms of piracy. But those things were coming up, and there was a need to do all of these things. We've had training for student leaders in the tertiary institutions, helping them to understand what it means to also maintain peace and be mindful of extremists who may come into their midst. Currently, we are working with secondary schools, helping them also to understand some of the students finish their exams, they burn school cars, they break louvers and all of those. There's a need for us to do. So those are the proactive things that we do to ensure that we maintain the peace and the stability of this country.
Let's look to 2024, big election coming up. The two major parties in this country have a lot to lose, and are certainly going to do whatever they can to win. Excesses are almost expected at this point. How is the Peace Council positioning itself to be a force for good, to hopefully prevent, or if the unfortunate happens, contain any such incidents?
One of the things we did after the last election was to pull together all the major players in our election space. We took them to Adan for 4 days and had time to review the last election, all the lessons we've learned. At the end of the day, there was a roadmap drawn. Some activities that were lined up to be engaged in before the next election. So the Peace Council has rolled out a lot of activities based on that. And we're still doing the best we can. We've had several engagements. We first met with the Chief Justice to look at the adjudication of parliamentary elections. We've done well with presidential 40 days or 42 days, it must be adjudicated. Parliamentary, nothing has been done. So we made a submission that they ought to look at that and shorten the time. We've had engagements with the Electoral Commission. We are still with them, still talking, trying to see what we can do going forward into 2024. We've had engagements with the parties. This year, we've visited a quarterly meeting with the political parties. So they come to our office, we talk, trying to find out what the issues are, what we can do. We've had engagement between the political parties, civil society, and the security services. We had one in Koforidua. For 2 days, we were all there to look at what civilians think about the security services and how they manage themselves. We had another one last month with the political parties and the Ghana police to look at how they perceive the police and what they consider police brutalities, how the police perceive them, what do we do to ensure that going into the next election will be fine. But one of the things that we did mention during that meeting was that the Kumewu and Asin North gave us the opportunity to test whether the things we've done are going to be successful. And having that kind of peace during that election, even though there were few skirmishes, I think it was not as bad as it used to be. So that gave us hope that it looks like some of the things we're doing might work. But those were contained within a small area. The issue is, are we going to be able to deploy it across the country? Yeah. So that's what we're working on now, to consistently pursue all of these steps and ensure that in the general elections, we should be fine.
So if there was one message you wanted our audience to take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
I would tell Ghanaians that we have something special in this country. I want to encourage each and every one of us, let us do the best we can to maintain the peace of our country. This is the only country we have. We can't go anywhere else. So we have to do the best we can to maintain the peace. Let's be accommodating. If you need clarity, seek for clarity instead of going out to attack people. Let us talk and resolve our issues instead of fighting.
Rev, I'm so glad you made the time to be with us this afternoon. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Reverend Dr. Edu Gyamfi is the chair of the Peace Council.